Welcome to Volume 2 of Around the Dial. Again, we start at WMOP radio station in Ocala, Florida, where hundreds of restored radios are on display in Jim Kirk's Museum of Sound for visitors to enjoy. At WMOP, restoration of vintage radios is a top priority. Mr. Ralph Williams explains.
We have a great variety of radios ranging from the 1920s through actually the 1960s and 70s. I enjoy mainly the 1930s radios, such as the old Cathedral Philco radios, and the Tombstone radios are my favorites. We also have quite a variety of Catalan radios, which came out in the mid-30s and through the mid-40s. They bring the big bucks, but I really like working with the old wooden case radios. To me, that's really almost like in heaven. You're working on these things, and it's such achievement to be able to get these things that have been idle for 50, 60 years, some of them 70 years, and actually have them play again. Sometimes you sort of feel like God, maybe breathing life into these old sets.
Without the dedication of such men as Ralph Williams and countless others in radio clubs around the world, vintage radios would be lost forever. Once again, we discover the immense diversity of radios produced over the years. Because of the large numbers of makes and models, information is often sketchy or not available. This Halton has little information to identify it. Considerable detective work needs to be done if this radio is to be completely described. The Howard Radio Company of Chicago, Illinois started selling radios in 1924. This was the year when radio production for the general public began in earnest. In 1929, Howard merged with the Everett Piano Company. Their last radios were produced during the late 40s. Howe crystal sets were simple, stylish, and inexpensive. This model originally sold for $1.98 and was manufactured in New York City. New York City was also the home for the Jewel Radio Corporation. This company made post-war radios through the early 50s. This 1947 Model 500 is one of the last wood jewels produced. Plastic had taken over as the preferred material for radio cabinets.
By me is a little International Cadet Model 40 called the Jewel. Now, when it was new, it was strictly brown and had a rather interesting piece of plastic for its grill. And I studied this radio quite at length to decide what the designer actually had in mind when he named it the Jewel. And as you can see, the result was a little bit of gold, some lavender, and then the ivory cabinet. I think that brought out the quality that the original designer had in mind. But I don't recommend that everyone do that to their little jewels. That's a very personal thing, and to me as an artist, it makes the set more luscious. But It also detracts from its value, and it's not original. But to the person that comes into this house and sees it, they find it delightful.
This marvelous lowboy console was one of Kellogg's last hurrahs. The Kellogg Switchboard and Supply Company dates back to 1897. They originally produced telephone equipment. This company, being reproduction sound specialists, ventured into radio production and manufactured radios from 1922 until 1930. Financial problems caused the company to drop their radio line. King Radio of Buffalo, New York was owned by Sears Roebuck. They made radios with Silvertone and King labels. Even with Sears as a parent company, King was out of business by the early 1930s. Lafayette Radio Wire Television Incorporated was located at 106th Street in New York City. Lafayette made radios from the 1930s through the 1960s. Lafayette's were mostly common-looking radios and were indistinguishable from other popular brands. A rare radio, this 1927 Lyric was made by All-American Mohawk Corporation of Chicago, Illinois. In the summer of 1927, Mohawk Electric Corporation joined forces with Wurlitzer. Mohawk was subsequently bought by the All-American electrical manufacturers. From late 1927 on, All-American Mohawk radios, such as this Lyric, were installed in fine Wurlitzer mahogany cabinets. Magnavox means great voice in Latin. The company's slogan today is Magnavox, smart, very smart. Formed in 1917 to make microphones and speakers, this Oakland, California company had difficulty in competing with Midwest and East Coast manufacturers. Credited with introducing single dial tuning in 1924, Magnavox's fortunes continued to decline. Eventually, Magnavox merged with the American Radio and Research Corporation of Medford Hillside, Massachusetts, commonly called AMRAD. AMRAD's life was short as money problems forced them to sell their Nutridyne license to Powell Crosley in 1925. Magnavox survived this turmoil and today is part of North American Philips, a strong competitor in consumer electronics. Another survivor of early radio manufacturing wars was Majestic. When Grigsby Grunow failed in 1934, Majestic Radio and Television Corporation of St. Charles, Illinois, was formed to continue production. Although Majestic was given more a reprieve than a lease on a long new life, the company did manage to make memorable, elegant consoles, table models, and novelty sets that are wonderful examples of the golden age of radio.
This is a Model 59 Majestic. It was one of the last hurrahs of the Grigsby Grunow Company. It was made in 1933 and uses a very, very stylish deco cabinet. The name of the radio, other than Model 59, it was called the Studio. This is a rather rare set. It has an aluminum grill, not chrome, but aluminum. And Grigsby Grunow, in the Depression era, went into receivership in probably late 1932, early 33, and brought out a stunning line of radios, both cabinet model and table models, in severe Art Deco design, hoping to save the company. But that didn't work. Nobody wanted fancy Art Deco radios at the price they were offered. So Grigsby Grunow went bust. The name Majestic was resurrected in about 1938 with the introduction of some novelty radios, and my favorite is the Melody Cruiser. This is the 1939 edition. Most everyone has seen this radio in the 1946 edition, which has a much larger dial. This one has the little squint dial that was in the Charlie McCarthy radio.
This 1938 Charlie McCarthy model was inspired by the highly popular Edgar Bergen and Charlie McCarthy radio show that went on the air May 9th, 1937, and continued as a prime-time half-hour comedy program into the 1940s. Now very collectible, this radio is rarely found in decent original condition.
Here's another one of the Majestic Radio and Television Company's creation. It's quite unique in that it's a clock as long as the radio is off. But when you turn the radio on, due to the two-way glass that mirrors the clock numbers, the radio dial appears by its dial light glowing behind, making for quite a unique feature.
Nobel Award recipient Guglielmo Marconi discovered and refined wireless telegraphy. He did not invent radio, only the wireless telegraph. In fact, he was cool to the idea of broadcasting music and voices over the wireless. Marconi radios were more popular in England than the United States. Midland Manufacturing Company of Decorah, Iowa made this radio in 1946. The dial is very stylish and has an Art Deco feel. Midwest Radio Company of Cincinnati, Ohio made some grand console sets. This 1935 18-tube set is powerful, has an elegant wood deco case, and an interesting dial of both bold and delicate design. Crystal sets were usually simple in design. This 1922 Miracle was an exception. Multiple tuning coils are used to enhance the signal. The Model 2 Miracle crystal set may have the distinction of being the Cadillac of crystal sets. The Mitchell Manufacturing Company of Chicago found a unique market, specialty radios. Their radio lamps are interesting. This example shows the concept of blending two household appliances into one convenient unit, a radio or lamp that can operate separately or together. Identifying some radios can offer a serious challenge. This Monarch and the following Montola are such radios. They offer little clues to their particulars. As soon as radios became popular in homes, the next logical step would be to place them in cars. Motorola started producing car radios in 1930 and made home sets later. Motorola was founded in 1928 by Paul Galvin. Before expanding into the radio field, he initially built power supplies in his Chicago factory. Motorola became one of the most recognizable names in radio communications and television. Motorola's stability was eventually established due to the production of dependable, portable, two-way communications equipment used in the military and local, state, and federal agencies. During the 1950s and early 1960s, Motorola table and portable radios became very popular due to their performance and very reasonable prices. Although Motorola is a common radio, there were some models that are worthy of a special place in radio history. One example is this 1939 Motorola Catalin. This beautiful radio is a $600 reproduction of that model. The original radio is valued by collectors at more than $3,000. This National Airphone set is a curious combination of an old crystal set chassis that was converted into a single tube receiver. This conversion improved audio at the headphones. The tube used was a WD-12. National Airphone was a very short-lived company. All we can tell you about National Union is that this company was located in Newark, New Jersey and made a few radios in 1947. Neutral-wound's history is a brief one. In 1926 and 1927, a company named Advanced Automobile Accessories Corporation made radios that were sold by the Neutral-wound Radio Manufacturing Company of Homewood, Illinois. Styled somewhat like the Atwater Kent breadboards, the Neutral-wounds were seriously outdated by the time they came to market. Difficult three-dial tuning and battery-powered, the Neutral-wounds were no competition for the single-dial AC sets that flooded the marketplace during the 1920s. Packard Bell is a popular computer company today. Herb Bell founded the original company in Los Angeles in 1933. Packard Bell made excellent quality radios and thus secured many government contracts during World War II. The original company was sold in 1971 to Teledyne. During the golden age of radio, Philco was one of the big three of radio manufacturers in the U.S., the others being RCA and Zenith. Philco appeared on the radio scene in 1927 with the advent of AC-powered radios. The company, however, had its start in 1892 when it was called the Helios Electric Company. In 1906, Helios became the Philadelphia Storage Battery Company. Philco consoles were elegantly designed and became valued furniture additions to homes. Philco's Baby Grand design, now called Cathedrals, were introduced by Philco in order to compete during the Depression years. The Cathedral style quickly caught on, and soon almost every radio company produced their own version of the Baby Grands. Millions of Philcos were made during the golden age of radio.
Here's another example of a unique cabinet from the 1940 era. This is a Philco PT69, a rather rare set because of its clock mechanism. Clock radios didn't make their debut until after World War II, when GE brought out the little one that would wake you up. This one, it would wake you up because it had a session movement in it that went putter, 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 putter all the time. My mom and dad bought this thing in about 1940, and it has survived all these years and still works today to perfection. 1939 and 40 were bumper years for radio manufacturers to make what I call the Mini-Mite set. Many of them were made out of plastic, but Philco attempted to do something with wood that resembles plastic. This is a model TP12 made out of various kinds of mahogany with white wood inlay. Very unique work on it. This also ushered in a new era as far as radio was concerned, in that the loop antenna had become standard equipment, and these radios were able to separate stations terrifically for their size, because these sold from anywhere from $9 to $15, which was a real bargain for such a powerhouse in radios.
Wednesday nights at 10 p.m. found listeners tuned to the ABC radio network eager to hear Bing Crosby perform on Philco's Radio Time program. Bing popularized the Philco Model 1201 radio phono. His records were played on this popular radio phono by thousands of his fans. Surprisingly, some models made in the late 1950s maintained many of the special Philco design characteristics. This little 1964 Philco car radio is a special limited edition radio. It was produced exclusively for Ford executives and managers. How many were made and how many still exist is unknown. One thing is for sure, they are highly collectible and valuable. Pilot Radio and Tube Company of Lawrence, Massachusetts started producing kit radios in 1922. A smaller player in the radio game, Pilot survived the Depression and World War II and manufactured radios and televisions into the 1950s. Radio is an entertainment medium, so it's perfectly logical that someone would think of making unique combination radios. This PlayPal seemingly was designed for a Saturday night at the card table. Metal radios were briefly popular in the late 1920s. The case finish on this Polydyne is typical of radios of this time period in design. Not really a novelty radio, this Smokerette was made with practicality in mind. This radio let Dad listen to his favorite news and sports programs while enjoying his special pipe. Radio Corporation of America, RCA, is a giant among giants and was established in 1919. For the first 10 years or so, RCA radios were made by General Electric and Westinghouse. RCA radiola sets were quite popular, and many examples of them can be found in both private and public collections. 1926, Gertrude Ederle of the United States spent 14 hours and 34 minutes in the icy waters of the English Channel. She swam this formidable stretch of sea and became the first woman ever to do so. Back home, Gene Tunney pounded Jack Dempsey into the ropes and won the World Heavyweight Boxing title. We heard it all on radio as the new NBC network, formed by RCA, broadcast this championship Friday night fight to the country. Gillette Razor Blade Company sponsored Friday night fights for many years. In 1929, RCA of New York City merged with the Victor Talking Machine Company, and RCA Victor was born. Like other companies, RCA console sets were designed to be centerpieces for the living room. The craftsmanship of these radios was superb. Today, collectible consoles are magnificent examples of the imagination and creativity of early radio builders. Just about all teenagers and bobby soxers during the 50s wanted or had a record player. Playing 45s on the front porch on a warm summer night was exactly what the designers had in mind for these portables. These little machines helped create great memories of the good times. A little dog named Nipper became one of the most famous logos of all time as he listened for his master's voice on 1 million RCA Victor radios and phonographs. In every field, there is one product that stands above the rest. Such is the case with Scott radios. Scotts were built with chrome chassis and exquisite cabinets. They were called the Cord Auburn Duesenberg and Stradivarius of radio receivers. Scots sometimes were not even put into a cabinet so that their chrome chassis could be admired. Scots were made through the 1930s and 40s. E.H. Scott, founder, left the company in 1945. Sentinel radios were made by the United Air Cleaner Company. Their most valuable and scarce models are housed in Catalan cases. Collectors value this radio at almost $1,000. This is a perfect example of how a plain Jane can turn into a princess. Silver Marshall was another Chicago-based company that made radios in the 1930s for a short time. Woodwork on this Silver Marshall is complex and a marvel to look at. The Silvertone brand was Sears catalog radio. Built with practical people in mind, Silvertone designs were seldom fancy. However, there is an exception to every rule. Some Silvertones were elegant in a plain and simple way. Silvertones of the late 40s and early 50s were influenced by the times. Unique models were made that now add colorful variety to any collection. Simplex radios were made in Sandusky, Ohio during the 1920s and 1930s. Once again, little information is available on these radios. If Scott was the Stradivarius of radios, then Spartan was the Van Gogh. Spartan radios were made by Sparks Withington Company of Jackson, Michigan. Spartans were bold and inventive in design. They command high prices today. This reproduction of the famous Spartan Model 557 sells for thousands of dollars. The originals for much more. And Spartan's legendary Bluebird is a rare radio that even in poor shape is treated as a fine, delicate, and expensive artifact. By the 1950s, Spartans had toned down their designs. Spartan then disappeared when the transistor revolution began in the 1950s. Stuart Warner manufactured auto parts until 1925. The Bar-Radio was a novel product that combined two leisure activities into a single unit. These Stuart Warner radios are some examples of design excellence produced by this company. The end of Stuart Warner came in 1954, and this gadabout marked the demise of another early radio pioneer who played a minor but interesting role in radio history. If radios could talk, we'd love to hear what this U.S. Apex could tell us. We know that it was made in the 1930s. However, that's where the trail runs out. You can be sure if it's Westinghouse is a familiar slogan. Westinghouse made radios for RCA in the early days. Westinghouse also supported KDKA, the first commercial radio broadcasting station. This station was located on the roof of one of Westinghouse's buildings in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
This is KDKA of the Westinghouse Electric and Manufacturing Company in East Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. We shall now broadcast the election returns. We are receiving these returns through the cooperation and by special arrangements with the Pittsburgh Post and Sun. The election returns will be broadcast as soon as they are received by us here at KDKA. We'd appreciate it if anyone hearing this broadcast would communicate with us, as we are very anxious to know how far the broadcast is reaching.
Westinghouse is another giant in the radio and appliance field. They made colorful and interesting radios during the golden age of broadcasting. No story on radio history would be complete without Zenith. Zenith began as Chicago Radio Labs in 1918. The name Zenith came from the call letters 9ZN, a Chicago radio station founded by Ralph Matthews and Carl Hassel. Zenith's success is attributed mainly, however, to Commander Eugene F. McDonald, who built the company into one of the big three of radio with RCA and Philco. The most famous and maybe most desirable are Zenith's big black dial sets. Zenith Transoceanic Portables were an exciting series that were a huge success. These radios are very collectible and unique. The Transoceanics brought us the world as never before, with a portability that made them a bestseller and a product line that lasted for years. Zenith radios were leaders in styling, too. Their plastic radios of the early 50s are unique and wonderful in variety. The most popular of these is the Royal Transistor series of the late 1950s. Zenith made some fine high-end radio consoles. If you find a 1936 Zenith Stratosphere console, you'll understand what Zeniths from radio's golden age were really all about.